Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series powered by openbusinesscouncil.org, citiesabc.com and fashionabc.org, and in the future sportsabc.org. So a lot of organizations we're taking forward. But this is a podcast about people, about personalities, about authors, about people that are changing the world and coming up with narratives that actually can help us better do business, better understand and manage technology, and use these tools for good, and at least to create great business that are sustainable. So we've been actually interviewing a lot of people worldwide, and today I'm quite excited to welcome to our series two authors and researchers that are actually senior partners as well in one of the biggest companies in the world, McKinsey, but as well two people that are actually working in a concept that is, I think, super important for us, for everyone listening to this podcast that is about business and technology, that is the ecosystem economy. So I welcome to our series Venkat Atluri and Miklós Dietz, senior partners at McKinsey. And I'll read a small bio of each of them before we go forward, and then I'll kick off. So Venkat Atluri, and I hope I'm spelling it correctly, is a senior partner and global leader of tech telecom practice at McKinsey with 22 years of experience in the firm. He has also co-founded and led the firm's Internet of Things practice. He is also an author and thought leader, contributed at McKinsey, including co-authoring The Ecosystem Economy, How to Lead in the New Age of Sectors Without Borders, along with Miklós Dietz, his co-author that I'm going to interview today. And of course, this book is published by Wiley, that is one of the publishing houses that we've been involved as well. So Venkat's academic background includes an MBA in strategy and finance from the University of Chicago. And prior to joining McKinsey, Venkat held global operating leadership roles at General Electric, as well as product development management and deployment at 3M. He joined McKinsey in 2001, has held many leadership positions throughout this tenure of the organization. And he created as well the division of IoT, where it's been actually managing a group that looks at manage different areas of IoT, but as well going forward in terms of incubate new analytics and digital assets and develop innovative client offerings and build alliance and partnerships with innovators. And he also led McKinsey efforts globally for the TMT practice to help clients and partners fast track and sustain transformational impact through leadership alignment, execution, support, and the capability. And he has a fantastic CV that we're going to be talking today. Then I think from the second author, I want to be synthetic here. So Miklós Dietz is a senior partner and also the managing partner of McKinsey and the company Vancouver's office, where he leads the strategy and corporate finance group within the global financial service practice. Miklós is a certified financial analyst, a member of the CFA organization, a founding member of the Hungarian Society of Investment Professionals, and an author that has done a lot of research, and of course the co-author of the book that is the focus today. And as well, Miklós was awarded the Knight's Cross of Hungary Republic for the support to the Prime Minister in managing the global financial crisis. And he holds a MPhil Finance and Econometrics from the University of Cambridge, a GD Law from Eötvös Loránd University, and a Master in Science Economics from Corvinus University of Budapest. And prior to joining McKinsey, he worked as a portfolio manager at Merrill Lynch in London, Los Angeles, and New York, managing both growth and value funds. So great achievements, great CVs. I could actually keep going for at least 10 minutes more. So welcome to our series, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Dinis. Thanks for having us.
Many thanks.
Now, it's great profiles, and actually I have a lot of respect for McKinsey for all the different things you guys have been doing. And actually one of the things is research. I think there's a lot of cutting edge research coming out of the organization, but your profiles are fantastic. So before we start going through what makes us, we brought us here, that is the book, I would like to talk about, you have very different backgrounds, but you did this book together. So how did you guys get along to create this, and a bit of your background, I think from background of education to your achievements, if you want to summarize that.
Yeah. Dinis, again, thanks for having us. Maybe I'll just start, and I'd love for Miklós to add on. So as you said, we do have different backgrounds. I come from more of a tech, media, telecom background, and how I grew up and how I've done my client work within the firm. And Miklós comes more from a banking background. But we do have a really overlapping interest. That interest is to look at the economy in a lens of where is the economy going, and particularly from a value creation standpoint. When you took that lens is where we had a lot of common interests, common ideas, and common perspectives that we thought it would be good for us to not only dig into them, also bring our years of wealth of experience to really develop some perspectives we thought would be helpful for a broader community, and also take a point of view on how the economy might evolve, and then in that evolution, not only what do you do about it, and how do you do what do you do about it. So that's sort of the broader view of how we came together, and it's been a great journey and a very enjoyable and very productive journey in many dimensions to work together and put out these different perspectives in a book we published with Wiley. Over to you, Miklós.
Yeah, I think what connects us is passion about this topic, which we believe is the single largest economic transformation in the history of this planet. And we came to this from very different perspectives, almost accidentally finding each other, even though we joined the same time, McKinsey 22 years ago. Where I think we are both coming from is that we are serving different but leading organizations in different sectors globally. I spent a lot of time in Asia and Europe. I spent a lot of time in banking, but also other sectors. And Venkat is obviously leading our telecom, media, technology work globally. And we are both encountering many, many companies who are trying to make long-term, truly long-term, 5-year, 10-year strategic decisions. And they are facing this enormous noise of technology changes, customer changes, and we were trying to help them to identify, separate the noise from the mega trend or the giga trend in this case. And we kind of independently realized that the giga trend is actually this transformation of sector barriers breaking down and the economy totally reorganizing. And we got both excited. Both of us started to work on these topics over 10 years ago, and we started to build up a little bit of infrastructure. And after a decade of working on this and serving really hundreds of companies, we felt that maybe we have learned enough from the successes and failures to be able to distill them into an interesting book. Hopefully it's interesting. It's definitely interesting for us.
No, it's a great book, and it's a book that I have close to me because it touches a lot of things. So before we go to the book, I want to ask to each of you one question, is that you guys work with some of the biggest organizations in the world. We have a fantastic as well background. So I would say that from your background, and one of course, I think in your case as well, Miklós, you were born as well in Hungary, and you end up actually in Canada, and as well in a very global organization. You work as well for a lot of different cultural, different backgrounds. And in your case, Venkat as well, I'm sure a lot of different parts. So from a different cultural background and from the way you look, I would say your business and career achievement with your kind of cultural background. And then there's the technology background, which is what the book touches. How do you see these things? I'm talking from each of you as individuals, because I think that's one thing that I always like to touch is the personality and the cultural background is like an operating system we have behind us, and they always mark us in one way or the other. And then, of course, there's all the business ecosystem, business culture. And of course, right now we get into accelerated technology, which is the purpose of your book and as well your research. So a bit of, if you want to touch these areas, each of you.
Go ahead, Miklós.
Okay, I'm happy to start here. So I am personally passionate about this topic, partially because of where I'm from. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and we were basically watching from the outside this enormously exciting, high energy, colorful environment of business evolution in the Western world, right? And it's hard to imagine how different it was when I was a child. A planned economy, people living in the same type of communist blocks, the government owning all assets. That was simple, clearly not working, visibly not working. And there was this amazing, exciting, constantly growing system at our borders, right? Only a few kilometers away, which just flowered, right? And that created enormous childish excitement in them, which still unfortunately stays the childish part as well as the exciting part, to really understand it, right? So I've had a bit of this outsider perspective. And then when, of course, the wall came down and it gave me opportunity to actually work, there was always a little bit of extra me, not just to understand what others are understanding, but also maybe add a little bit more of a historical, multi-generational view into this, because what a lot of people takes natural is not natural for me.
And then, as you know, I have a cultural background of being born in India and migrated to the U.S. I also lived different parts of the world. I have had the chance to live and spend time doing working and also doing various kinds of things around the globe. And that it really gave me a pretty broad perspective on just understanding what's going on in different parts of the world and different parts of the economy, in different parts of the world. And when I tried to step back and think about, every few years, step back and think about what am I learning from the work I'm doing, the research I'm doing, the work I'm doing with our clients, the research we're doing, and also just my personal experiences dealing with a client globally. And I've had the real good fortune of working with companies around the globe. And at some point during my 22 years career, at various points in my 22 years career at McKinsey, I've served clients in every key continent of the world. And that just gave me a ton of very diverse set of perspectives. When I weave all of them together and you try to figure out what are the really key and very important learnings, and that really one of the reasons how we ended up joining forces with Miklós and writing this book. And we'll get into some of the exciting things that Miklós mentioned that are happening in the economy around ecosystems, and that those are truly not based on what's happening in the U.S. or what's happening in Asia. It's truly based on what's happening globally, and bringing those to bear. And I think again, I'm somewhat fortunate to have that global experience, global perspective, and always rely on global set of friends and mentors and colleagues to really foster that and build on it.
No, that's fantastic. And I think this is the more important thing. I think when we talk about ecosystems, about technology, we need to start with our cultural background and how we mitigate this. So let's go to the book, and it's the purpose, of course, of this interview, which is a fantastic book for people listening to us. So our team is going to put the book as we speak, and you can see all the links in here in the interview. But so the book is the Ecosystem Economy: How to Lead in the New Age of Sectors Without Borders. So we start by the cultures. Now let's go to the book. So and I will just read a bit of the introduction that is for people listening to us, and then I have a couple of questions that we're going to kick off. So the ecosystem economy offers a compelling new take on how the global economy is being fundamentally transformed by the acceleration of new technology development, evolving consumer preferences and behaviors, business models, and organizational and performance management constructs. And in the book, of course, there's a case that the traditional sector silos are breaking down. They demonstrate how business leaders at all levels can exploit disappearing barriers between sectors to reimagine and refocus their organizational efforts to create substantial and durable new competitive advantages. So this book, of course, was launched before the Chat GPT. So now the velocity is going to be much bigger, and the book is more relevant than ever. So let's look at the book. If you want to summarize some of the ideas of the book and how you want to take it forward within the context for people listening to us that probably didn't read the book, or I think they should at least get information about the book. So how do you summarize the book for people listening to us?
Yeah, let me, I can take a first shot at that, Dinis, and then I would love for Miklós to add to, again, what I try to at least give you a summary of the book. So if you start with a simple question on taking a look at, if you take a look at top 10 or top 15 highest market cap companies, and what are they over 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and now, there's a very interesting shift that's happened. 30 or 40 years ago, you would find that in that list, it was mainly oil companies, banks, pharma companies. And if you look at the same list today, obviously the amount or the total value of the market cap, combined market cap of those 10 or 15 companies has grown exponentially. But most importantly than that, the company's mix have changed quite a bit. You see a lot more companies that are digitally oriented, technology oriented. You can kind of guess who they would be. And if you dig deep into the companies that are creating the highest market cap today versus 2 or 3 or 4 decades ago, you would uncover a very interesting phenomena. That is, most of those businesses, not all of them, most of those businesses have some ecosystem-oriented approach to how they create value and how they deliver value. And you can name, we take the top 5 or top 10, and we can make an easy case that they have an ecosystem-oriented business as one of the bases, through which they're serving customers and they're serving consumers. So when we dug deep into that, and obviously when we say ecosystem-oriented business, and the definition matters, let me kind of define what we mean by that. Ecosystem-oriented business, in our view, is the entities, business entities, coming together either physically or digitally in the best interest of serving the end consumer, and bringing together their capabilities, their assets, their human resources, and all aspects of what they can offer, and really in the best interest of serving the consumer and what they wanted, and when they wanted, and how they want to consume it. In doing so, they're not just splitting the pie that's existing. They're actually expanding the pie with this ecosystem business, and he's sharing the expansion of the pie. To us, that's a very important definition. So with that definition, if you go back to the market cap companies I talked about, highest market cap companies I talked about, they all have an element of that, or a very strong element of that. So that's the basis of why we think when Miklós said this is one of the most consequential and really revolutionary thing happening in the global economy. That's really the basis that we believe in. Now that's great. That's what's happening. And now I'm going to just make 3 quick points, and I'll pause for Miklós to add, right? And the question is, why is that happening, and what are the consequences of that? We believe it's happening because there is a lot more acceleration of technology. You can measure the number of patents. You can measure how fast things like GPT are getting adopted. You can give you lots of stats there. It's really acceleration of technology. And then second, in addition to that, that technology acceleration is also changing the way the consumers behave in terms of how they consume things. And as a service model, more shared economy, more shared ways in which you would use your services and things like that. So collectively, the technology acceleration and consumer behavior and consumer consumption patterns are the 2 drivers that are bringing a lot of barriers down. The supply chain barrier, the demand line barrier, the IT services barrier, all the barriers are coming down. Hence, the ecosystem evolution is happening while the traditional sectors that you see in the economy, 10 or 12 or 15 sectors of the economy, the borders across those sectors are blurring. So if you're a player in tech space, you're a player in a financial services space, you're a player in a manufacturing space, it's a lot easier for you with an ecosystem approach, go participate in a different sector that would have been harder to participate 10 or 15 years ago. So that's the thesis of how the market cap companies are evolving and where the value is getting created. And then why? The why is what we just talked about, right? Now, going forward, what do you do about it? Obviously, what do you do about it is you really need to figure out where you want to play in that ecosystem evolution, what role you want to play, and how you execute, that what and the how, what role, And that's kind of what we did describe in the book. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a summary of the overarching themes that we have in the book. Over to you, Miklós.
Well, thank you. Just perfect summary, Venkat. I'm just adding a few colors here and there. Number one, to give you some historical feeling, since first, let's say, semi-advanced societies like ancient Sumeria has appeared with proper distribution of labor and specialization, the global economy have always been orchestrated in sectors, right? Because different type of services, from smithery to agriculture, they have different distribution, different data, different know-how, different supply chains. They always organized across how the industries make sense rather than what customer needs. And this existed for thousands and thousands of years. Occasionally, slowly, these sectors have been known to merge, right? When the appearance of supermarkets or just industrial revolution. But it was a slow, multi-generational process, and many sectors have been unchanged for hundreds of years. What we are arguing now is that because of the reasons Venkat has listed, this change is accelerating beyond anything, even beyond what we normally accept already, technology acceleration, because these barriers are now breaking down at an astonishing speed. Those technology changes, everything what separated sectors, for example, unique distribution is now broken down by the change, by the appearance of smartphones, for example. You used to go to a different bank branch and a different insurance broker and a different retailer. Now you can get everything online. Anything what separated sectoral unique data with big data, AI. By the way, this is why the book actually speaks quite a lot about AI. Obviously, not just ChatGPT, but the overall implications. AI truly reinvent and can create absolutely powerful cross-sectoral data and insights, which again changes totally, breaks down that barrier. Unique know-how, broken down. Supply chains, you can now disaggregate everything via marketplaces. So our argument is that there are all these interesting things happening on the surface, but the common theme among many of them, from blockchain to metaverse, is making it easier and easier to create cross-industrial journeys. And the thing is, customers want it. They always wanted it. They wanted it 10,000 years ago. And now that the barriers are down, what emerges instead? An economy which is orchestrated on fundamental customer needs. In the B2C part, it's about fundamental human needs. For example, people don't want mortgages or home insurance. They want homes. That's the fundamental need. So if you can create a customer journey when you can find your home, move in, finance it, maintain it, repair everything in one unified solution, of course you prefer that. The same way as we have seen in digital media, how people actually want to get end-to-end platforms like file sharers or streaming companies. So customers really want that. And for the B2B part, it's institutional needs. For example, organizations have the HR needs. They need to bring in talent. They need inputs. They need to obviously have financing. So these are kind of create very substantial groups. And our general statement is that we believe that the primary organization of the future economy will be huge, rather than traditional sectors, huge ecosystems collapsing and emerging around major customer needs. The rules of these games are vastly different than what companies have seen in the past. Competition is not for market share anymore. Competition is for customer ownership. Your goal is not necessarily to take share from your competitors, which is a zero-sum game logic, but it's more like grow the pie together. The winner is the one who orchestrates these ecosystems or participates in, who really can have unique data and unique customer understanding. And the companies who are not keeping up, they don't necessarily disappear, but they get disintermediated, disaggregated, commoditized, and even made invisible. And what we are also saying that we have run some numbers, because we are, of course, at least I'm certainly the geek and the nerd and the number guy. Venkat is more balanced. We run some numbers and we try to understand how much of the economy can transform this way. And we basically looked at all the revenue pools globally. We disaggregated the one which is the distribution part of the economy. We looked at how much has already been digitalized, how much can be touched by an ecosystem, not necessarily owned, by orchestrated, touched, and influenced. And our results suggest that as much as $80 trillion of global revenue pools could be orchestrated by ecosystems in around 10 years' time, which would justify the multi-trillion-dollar bet by capital markets on these cross-industrial platforms, which Venkat has pointed out. These cross-industrial platforms are not just giving what customers want, which ultimately is the best recipe in economic history, but they are also doing it with light capital, incredibly attractive business models, and the magical ability to go out into a positive spiral. And that positive spiral is getting customer connectivity and traffic, therefore getting a lot of customer data, therefore being able to create true strong emotional connections with the customers. Therefore, you get even more traffic. And by this spiral, of course, you bring in growth. And if you bring in growth, you bring in capital, and then you bring in the best talent. And then, of course, you invest even more. And what we are fascinated about is how can we create from the kernels and existing businesses, even incumbent businesses, this positive spiral, which when kicks in, creates enormous value to every stakeholder, from the environment to shareholders to employees.
Fantastic. So let me go a couple of details here in terms of concepts and terminology. So like you said, history is shifting the way we do in business. And actually I think there was a fantastic interview with actually one of as well a global thought leader that I forgot that most of the business infrastructure we have is from the last 30, 40 years. Before that, we had no kind of even business or startups, we had families and actually governments, more or less. So what we have is quite new, but the velocity it's the difference. And like you said, if you look at the Sumerians or the society, if you look at society 1.0 to 1.5, of course, humanity changed massive, and there's different concepts. You can look at society 5.0 for fourth industrial revolution. But the point right now is that actually there's a sense, and actually books like yours are very important to be studied in universities, because this idea of, first of all, defining what is the ecosystem economy, and defining it in terms of the way it, like you have in your book, is the walls come tumbling down and the accelerating path ahead. This is part of your first part of the book. So let's look at defining the ecosystem economy from the perspective of the book, because I think that's a key element. And you touch it, both of you touch it, but like right now, go a bit broader, because you touch the context of the book. Now, this definition is key.
So, Dinis, we gave you a broader definition of ecosystem, ecosystem-oriented business, where we said bringing business entities together, digital or physical, and then sharing all the capabilities they have in the best interest of serving the customers and then through their customer journey, different aspects of the customer journey, doing so, offering what they want, when they want it, and how they want to consume it, and then creating value and then sharing that value surplus, not just by splitting the pie, but really growing the pie. That's the broader definition we gave you a couple of minutes ago. Now, just to give you one level deeper definition, right? Maybe just take an example, and I'll just take an example, maybe easier for your audience to grasp. That is, take the smartphones as an example. Take there are two major smartphone platforms out there. One's one that's put out by Apple. The other one's put out by Google with Android, and the Apple one is iOS. So both of them, and I'll just take either one of them as an example, created a platform, and they are the anchor. The role they're playing for the platform is they're the owners of the platform, and they're bringing in partners, meaning the developers, app developers who develop apps, and they're also bringing in users like you and I, and you consume those. And doing so, they offer the platform, they're pooling the best of what the developers have to offer, and then collectively they created this app economy. The app economy didn't exist before. It's a good example of to kind of put our definition to a practical use. They expanded the pie, and obviously you can argue how the pie is getting shared, but and then obviously in part of the expansion of the pie gets shared by the platform or the smartphone platform owners. And then by doing so, by participating as a developer, you get in value as well, because you're getting into businesses that probably didn't exist in the past, or maybe existed but they're not as efficient in the past, right? So that's a very practical example of an ecosystem-oriented business in software in the smartphone market that got created, and that flourished. I mean, it's been a really interesting trajectory they've had since 2008, 9, or 10 for the last 10 or 15 years. Hope that gives you a level deeper definition, not a macro definition of what we mean by ecosystem businesses. And by the way, we can quote other examples. Now you don't have to take a tech example, and maybe I'll give you a 30-second another example. There's another company, I won't name the name of the company, but another company in the US that created an interesting digital platform. And their proposition is that they would bring in the trusted advisors that could help with all the technology needs. So for example, you're a small business or a medium business or even a large business. If you need some expertise to drive, let's say you want to migrate from one video platform to another video platform for video conferencing, that would require some expertise, right? You may or may not have this expertise in-house. So the platform would curate all the trusted advisors that could advise on the particular topic, and they would screen them, they would quality control them, they would provide domains which you can bill and invoice for their services. And then they also curate the demand from a demand side and who wants those services from small, medium companies. And then collectively, they created this ecosystem of trusted advisors and the users. And it's a great example of, non-tech, more, distribution-oriented ecosystem that they created. And we believe businesses like that would pop up and, serve, to Miklós' earlier point, broader needs. It's all about serving the customer needs more so than serving anything else. Right? Hopefully those two examples, Dinis, will give you a deeper practical sense for the macro definition we gave you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Miklós, you want to add?
I would add rather an extra color, because it's hard to add anything to Venkat's perfect summary. But the one nuance I would add is that it's a very interesting global phenomenon. In fact, a little bit of almost like paradoxically, it's not necessarily the most advanced market who are leading in this, right? US, UK, they are quite advanced markets, but some of the most interesting and transformative ecosystems actually emerge from markets who are leapfrogging, because in a funny way, when certain sectors are less embedded and certain populations are younger, and in generally societies have less of a tradition how to do banking, how to do wealth management, how to do healthcare, it's actually easier to reinvent these journeys. So this is why we see this phenomenon when a large part of truly innovative cross-sectoral business models actually emerge from places like East Asia, India, Eastern Europe, Africa actually, and we kind of see how that cross-sectoral model enables companies to come up with very different economic models, which then frequently and in very different pattern than that's copied by US-based or UK-based institutions. What we are also seeing on this ecosystem transformation though is that in many countries they started different regulatory environments, different demographics, different financial situation, and the starting points, right? How embedded certain sectors are, how much history they have, uninterrupted history they have versus wars or big transformations like system changes. Yet they all seem to evolve towards more or less the same form, because human needs are actually remarkably uniform across cultures.
So This is amazing, and I think there's a lot of nuances here, because I think the challenge right now is how we take it forward and how we can actually leapfrog the challenge of creating, first of all, a culture that can adapt towards the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is broader, like you guys said. And I think one of the things that I love about the book is that there's, for instance, one of the things is that really how you find your place in the ecosystem, choosing your role and picking the right collaborators. So with the experience that you have, and I think this is the key element, because you first of all have to build a culture or business that adapts to this. So from your experience, and if you want to list some case studies, feel free. What would be the, of course, there's, like you said, there's the top 10 companies in the world that are all adapting to this. And if you see, even Aramco is right now reverse engineer at this. And I know that you guys, McKinsey was very influential in terms of changing the business model of a country like Saudi. But from a perspective of this part of the adapting to the ecosystem and getting to the ecosystem, what be the advice you give to business, small, medium, and big? Because at the end of the day, it's the same advice, but of course with different instruments.
Yeah. So let me start, and then Venkat, please step in. I think first and foremost, we are really pushing businesses to kind of take a step back and look at their core businesses fundamentally different. To be very clear, the ecosystem idea, we are very proud that we wrote a book about it, but by now, it's not a very controversial topic. Most companies in the world would recognize that. Most conferences, people would speak about the barriers between sectors going down, maybe a touch less enthusiastically or passionately than us, but this is now so visible, so unquestionable, cutting through cycles. In fact, actually, during situations like COVID, they actually show how stronger ecosystems are than traditional supply chains. So this is not the problem that people don't necessarily recognizing it. They are facing two problems and two challenges that they have to fight. The first one is, can you really take a step back and think about what is the fundamental customer need you are solving? It's even for the smartest of people, if they spend same 20, 30 years in the same industry, they get used to a certain type of thinking. It's very hard to recognize that, hey, I'm actually not in the car making business. I'm actually in the mobility business. Cars are just part of a fundamental need to mobility. Hey, I'm not, when I'm kind of making wellness shoes or wellness or clothes, I'm actually part of a broader health and wellness type of universe rather than just, making product. So step number one, try to really, for them, take a look at what is the fundamental need you are solving, right? People don't want payments or credit cards. They want to buy products. Payments and credit cards just as necessary elements, and make them invisible or comfortable, and we will use it. Then make sure that the companies are rethinking how they think about partnerships, because the core concept of ecosystems, even if you look at the biological definition, is this incredibly complicated and beautiful partnerships and collaboration of symbiotes, creatures, sometimes creatures hunting each other, but mainly they are coexisting in large, complex ecosystems. And we argue business is much more like this, and especially in the future, when it's freed up from the sectoral barriers, it will be much more like a very traditional, healthy, constantly growing ecosystem. So think about your partnerships. And what Venkat always likes to point out, if you say, oh, well, we have partners because we have suppliers and distributors, then you're wrong. Those are not the type of partnership you need to think about. You may want to cooperate with your biggest competitors. You want to compete with your biggest cooperators. You want to think about partnerships which truly grow the pie rather than share. So that's number one. Really think about what need you are serving and how you are partnering across serving it, and really break out of the box. And again, intellectually, everybody agrees, but it's hard because you have to change embedded thinking. The other part, which is equally hard, is the organizational governance. So again, most companies are very smart. They see the writing on the wall. And we mentioned the tech companies, but I want to emphasize that in almost any industry, from toy making to insurance, by now the largest and most valuable companies are cross-industrial, right? They do cut across businesses. What is the challenge is how to run an existing organization which was designed for one traditional industry and yet build new businesses in parallel. It's not something you can do on the side of your deck. If you, it's like Goldilocks zone in a planetary system. If you get too close to the sun, you get burned. If you are too far, you freeze. Same applies. If you try to build this too close to the core company, then of course it's very hard to fight the gravity of everyday business. If you get too far, you will be just like, some kind of nice little ideation. Find this zone in between when you can incubate, accelerate, but lead it back to the business, when you can fail fast and experiment, but you still can do it at scale and really create cross-industrial journeys for customers. That is the other thing. So at least, again, I'm oversimplifying, but these two big elements are what we try to tell to our clients.
Yeah. Dinis, maybe I'll add just a couple of quick things to this. You asked us, what do we advise and how do we advise on this topic? One of the things I'm just going to maybe re-emphasize what Miklós said. When you develop your strategy, historically, when you look at developing a strategy, you look at where's my market going, where are my competitors going, how do I position myself in the market and things like that. There's one very critical element missing in that strategy development process. That is, more often than not, most companies do not take the view of what ecosystem do I need to serve those customers' needs. Do I need one? In most cases, they do. If the answer is yes, we do need one. And are you part of an ecosystem that's existing today, or do you need a new ecosystem to serve those customers' needs? And if you need a new ecosystem, are you going to develop one, or are you going to rely on somebody else's? Those sets of questions, embedding those sets of questions and answering them thoughtfully in the strategic development process is the really new way that we would like our companies to think about and really get to position themselves to get ahead in the ecosystem economy evolution. That's one point. The second point I'd like to make on this is it's often very exciting, and I'll use the term very subtly to say, okay, I am the orchestrator. I'll play the role of the platform developer, and then I will build the ecosystem. By the way, some companies are really positioned well to do something like that, but you got to be really careful on what role are you taking. Are you be the anchor, or you be the participant on somebody else's ecosystem, or you could be somewhere in between. That choosing that role is very, very critical. You could make, just like the way Miklós was saying about the Goldilocks zone for government, it's equally important to figure out what role are you going to play in that ecosystem. And if you're not careful, and if you're not thoughtful, and if you're overly ambitious, or not as ambitious as you should be, you could really either burn yourself, or you could also leave a ton of value on the table. So that's a very, very critical thing. And in the book, we go through at least some approach on how you get to grips with and how you determine the way in which you would determine that role. So those are two additional things, Dinis, I thought would be beneficial to add to what Miklós said.
No, excellent. And I think this is actually, I like the metaphor of the Goldilocks, but I think it's really important that we can actually go and get deep in this ecosystem. Like you said, the concept right now is accepted. I think it's mostly by big corporations, because the rest of the economy is struggling to define even the concept of digital transformation and a lot of other things, which I think is much more important, because, for instance, there's around 400 million SMEs and micro SMEs, at least there's different numbers, but this is one of the numbers, and 90% don't even have a website, and they struggle with digital. So that brings us to, right. And I know that we are running out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. And there's a lot of more questions and a lot of more areas that I would like to go, but one question I would like to touch, and of course you don't need to go through all of them, but in the conclusion of your book, you have 10 time-tested principles for the emerging ecosystem economy. And I think this is a key element, at least. Of course, the idea is for people to read the book, but at least some summary on this, because I think is a great conclusion as well for our interview that we're running, at least in terms of the time that we planned.
Miklós, please start, and I will jump in.
Let me just maybe start with just one comment on what you said about small companies, and then Venkat, I let you summarize the 10 timeless tests. Dinis, I do agree that smaller companies are sometimes behind the curve on digitalization. I would argue, though, that this phenomena is not just for large companies. In fact, many of the companies I'm working with are smaller players, including even credit unions, cooperative banks, or pretty small niche players. Frequently, this ecosystem concept actually gives a new life and a new opportunity for them. It's very hard for a small company to compete end-to-end digitalization with economies of scale challenge. It's much easier for them to identify a customer need, orchestrate an end-to-end journey, maybe just in a geography, maybe in a small place. So I would say, surprisingly, some of the most interesting, value creative and customer loved ecosystem outcomes we are seeing are coming from traditional industries, smaller players who just found their little pieces. And what makes them more powerful is once they create these cross-industrial journeys, they actually, funnily and coincidentally, they have to actually be less worried about crazy digital competition. They can partner with digital players. I would also add that technologies like cloud computing and others, if run well, can actually be the great equalizer for many of the medium-sized companies. So not to say that it's easy for them, I'm just saying it's not necessarily just a large company phenomenon. But again, I know this is not your question, so Venkat, maybe you answer that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Dinis, I'll add one thing to what Miklós said, and I'll answer your question about the top 10, so the 10 time-tested principles, and I'll pick a couple of my favorite ones. It's interesting when you look at, Miklós and I have been doing a lot of rounds with the different constituents in the economy. It's interesting, at least for me personally, was that we've gotten a ton of interest on this topic from investor community, funds and other aspects of investor community. And then we kind of asked the question, why there's so much interest in the investor community. I think the investors are realizing that this could be a very interesting investable topic, if you will, Dinis. Meaning, if you build a thesis around your fund or your investments on investing in ecosystem-oriented, startups or growth companies, that could be an interesting way to differentiate yourself from an investment thesis standpoint. So, which is an interesting, at least for the learning for me. I didn't realize that investors would be as much interested in this topic as would be Miklós said about startups from the established companies. So back to the 10 time-tested principles. We all have our own favorites. I'll pick 3 of them. Dinis, in closing, that I personally are somewhat passionate about, and I always try to make sure that these are talked about. First and foremost, it's really starting with the customer, ending with the customer when you're developing what you want to do and how you want to do it in the ecosystem economy. And then Miklós made this point that several times in our conversation. It's about really taking care of the customers throughout the journey of their needs, not the traditional journeys of what we talk about in go-to-market concept. It's really throughout the journey of their needs. That's number one, time-tested principle that we really have to keep in mind. Number 2, Miklós said this, I'm going to re-emphasize this, right? It is very easy for you to fall into the trap of, oh yeah, I have vendors or suppliers, I run RFP. The minute you say I have vendors and suppliers that run the RFP process, that means you don't get it. That is not what we're talking about in the ecosystem. Ecosystem business is really in the partnerships. You're bringing 1 plus 1 together, and you're making it a lot more than 2, and then you're sharing the expanding of that pie. And then the third, is again one of my favorite ones is that a lot of companies, as they grow, and especially the mid and larger size companies that try to grow, they always confront with the idea of where do I vertically integrate versus where do I not. You got to be extremely careful about where you truly vertically integrate versus where you use ecosystem as a way to add value. And again, we go into in the book, we go in detail on this time-tested principle. But those are the 3 I would pick in closing that I would pay a lot of attention to. And you're thinking about how do you evolve your business, and how do you invest in ecosystem-oriented business, or how do you create an ecosystem-oriented business? Hope that's helpful, Dinis.
Well, fantastic, and I think it's been a privilege, and there's a lot of things that come to my mind. I think especially I urge people listening to us to engage in the book. There's a lot of research and a lot of great videos as well that you did presenting this. But I want to thank you, both of you. I have much more questions, especially how to take one of the questions I'll leave for us probably for a second take, because I would like to continue, is the area how you look at the ecosystem or the ecosystem economy with all the areas of that we have seen right now. You touch, I didn't touch much about the AI, but are we going to, with the velocity, because the velocity of AI, if you look at, for instance, even the ecosystem that ChatGPT created, 100 million people, ecosystem plus, and probably right now it's 200 or 300 million in the case of less than 2 months. But as well as the velocity, a lot of part of the economy right now, there's the ecosystem we need still to get, but is the velocity, how we take that into this. And I think that's things that come to my mind, and the book is great to aggregate the narrative, how you take that. So I want to thank you. I don't know if you want to just have a last word. I know that we run out of time, but I think that for people listening to us, definitely this is a key element. And especially one of the things I have is, you mentioned here is, I think it's a common one, but it takes a village or five. Yeah. It takes a village. It really takes a village, but it takes as well the path you choose, because you need to really, this is something that doesn't happen. Everyone thinks you're going to change the world in 5 minutes, and this is a continuous work of trial and error. And
the only closing comment I would have, Dinis, is we would love to hear feedback. We would love to learn, from others on how they see it. We are highly reachable on some social media. Please do ping us, give us feedback, good, not so good, and we love to interact and continue the dialogue. And thanks so much for giving us time to really, at least express our passion for this topic and share our perspectives.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you very much. We could have talked probably hours and hours on this topic. So it's good that there is a time limit. But really looking forward to maybe continuing this conversation, including GPT-4 and how it can kind of reshape or even accelerate this trend even further. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Thank you. An honor.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.